Hello everyone, Carnasa here, and welcome back to Kerbal Gets Real, and a very special episode of Kerbal Gets Real indeed. We are only going to be focusing on one mission this episode, and that is going to be Serenity I. Launched from Cape Canaveral on the 2nd of December 1964, Serenity is going to be our series of missions that is equivalent to the Apollo series. We are going to go to the moon, and we are going to attempt to land some astronauts on the surface. The Serenity series of missions will be taken up to orbit by a purpose-built launch vehicle, and that is the Heracles Super 64. A very large launch vehicle indeed, capable of taking up to 120 tons to low Earth orbit. It has a sea level thrust of around 31,700 kilonewtons, provided by 4 F1 boosters and 7 LR87 LH2 engines on its core stage. So the crew on board Serenity I is going to consist of Albert Harper, who was actually our first ever astronaut into space all the way back in 1958. He is going to be joined by Ellen Cox and Valentina Zimmerman, two really fresh-faced recruits who have never actually seen a flight before. So what they lack in experience, let's hope that they make up in spirit at least, because this is quite a complicated mission. And probably I should have sent someone more experienced for our first lunar landing. So the mission structure of Serenity is going to very closely follow the mission structure of Apollo. We have two main components that we are going to be sending to the moon. We have the Tranquility Orbiter, which we've already seen in use in the Tranquility mission, and then we have the Kestrel Lander, which is going to be the section of the mission that actually lands on the lunar surface. So the first launch of a Heracles Super 64 was a complete success. We were able to get Serenity I into a low Earth orbit, which is nice because that's not guaranteed. Obviously I am playing with test flight, so failures do occur, disasters happen, things go wrong, engines break, fuel cells leak. I don't actually think that happens, but you know, things go wrong. Anyway, we are now performing our translunar injection. 37 minutes into the flight, we did have to fly around the Earth just a little bit so that we could meet up with our maneuver node to perform our translunar injection. For this stage, we are using a J2 230K. It's basically the best large Hydrolox engine that I have unlocked at the moment. It is more than sufficient to carry that stage to the moon though. So here is the first reveal of the Kestrel Lander. Obviously, I have not shown this in any episodes before. Those fairings have now deployed, and we can finally see what this entire mission looks like. I did say this is structured very similar to the Apollo missions, so obviously we are going to be doing a little bit of a docking maneuver in space near Earth. We have used up our our translunar injection stage though. Now that that's all gone, we can actually detach the main mission and connect them together. But there it is, the Kestrel Lander. I am using the Alcor pod for that, just because the Alcor pod is so nice. It has the best IVA out of any pod I think I've ever seen, and I would use it for absolutely everything if I could. It just looks incredible, and we are going to get a lot of shots of the inside of that cockpit later on in this mission. But there we go, we had a successful docking. We have all of our parts of the mission connected now, and they are on their way to the moon. So here we have put our spacecraft in passive thermal control mode, better known as the barbecue roll, because obviously the trip to the moon is long, and if we were in the same attitude the entire way, well, one side of the spaceship that will be facing the sun will get very hot and the other side might be a little bit cold. So It's, yeah, basically to spread out the heat throughout that spacecraft. I believe, I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think that's what the barbecue roll was for. But anyway, after spending nearly 5 days in flight, we have finally reached the moon's sphere of influence, and we are going to capture around the moon using the HA-10-137 service module engine, the same engine that was used on the Apollo service module. Basically, it is the best engine for the job here. So here we have the first look inside the Kestrel lander. Like I said, I am using the Alcor pod for this because look at it, it looks absolutely amazing. Albert Harper and Ellen Cox have made their way into the landing module from the command module. Albert is currently very busy pressing buttons and flicking switches because he is very easily distracted, and they are making their final preparations to undock from the command module and begin their descent to the lunar surface. But now that the Kestrel has undocked from the command module, it is go time. We have a target in our sights, and that target is the Oceanus Procellarum. It's large, it's mostly flat, so it shouldn't be too difficult to land on there. So we have just lit up our LMDE, the Lunar Module Descent Engine. It is the engine that I'm going to be using on the descent stage of this craft. Once again, it's a very good engine for the job. However, it does only have 3 ignitions, which means I cannot perform this landing with MechJeb. MechJeb really does not have a good time when it comes to landing with limited ignition engine, so we had to control this thing for the entire descent, but not that that was really an issue. This thing was actually really nice to fly. The Lunar Module Descent Engine is very deeply throttleable, down to about 11% I believe, which makes it rather easy to control your rate of descent. But here we have the landing gears being deployed, ready for our final touchdown. We would not want to land on our engine. That would be very bad. I would quite like to use that stage to give us a little bit of a boost to our ascent stage if we have any fuel left. So obviously we got to keep that protected at all costs, and I think landing on it is a surefire way to cause some damages or breakages. But here we are now, approaching our final stages of the Kestrel's descent onto the surface of the moon. So, nearly 5 days after setting off from Cape Canaveral, the Kestrel has landed on the 7th of December 1964. A truly amazing feat of human engineering to send 2 astronauts all the way over here to the moon where they can study it and see if it's made out of cheese. I don't think it is. I think it's mostly made out of rocks. Sorry, Wallace and Gromit, but you'll have to search for cheese elsewhere. Anyway, Albert Harper and Ellen Cox have successfully touched down. Now they're going to remain in that capsule just for a little bit whilst they prepare themselves for their descent onto the surface. We are taking safety into consideration here. We've got to make sure that everything is working fine before these two brave astronauts make the final descent and be the first two astronauts to descend onto an otherworldly body. It's very, very, very exciting indeed. And, well, this is by far the earliest I've ever made a lunar landing in RP1. 5 years before NASA did it. I don't think I've ever beaten NASA before. So here we have Albert Harper stepping out 4 days, 23 hours and 42 minutes after they left Cape Canaveral. He is going to be the first man on the moon. And I don't know if you caught that there, but actually the way I've designed those ladders for that lander, they kind of get a little bit stuck when they are going onto that second one. And this actually led to a problem later on trying to get Albert Harper back onto the craft. So RCS thrusters on the moon don't work as well as they do in the moon in stock KSP, because obviously the moon's gravity is a lot higher, so you can't really go very far with RCS thrusters on the moon. Like, you can't float off into space. So when Albert Harper had finished collecting all of his samples and all of that on the surface of the moon, he weighed a fair bit more than he did when he first got off there. He probably took some moon rocks and thought they might be food, or I don't know what he was doing. But yeah, it actually meant I had to really fiddle around with jumping and using RCS to get him back into the craft. I was really worried I wasn't going to be able to get him back up. Ellen Cox was fine. She was absolutely fine because she didn't have that extra weight of the sample, so she was able to do a little bit of a jump and RCS to that second ladder. You can see there's the one at the bottom and then there's the one at the top. And the way that they are placed, yeah, it's kind of funny getting astronauts back on there. But Ellen Cox has had enough of her time on the lunar surface. She took a lovely photograph with Albert Harper, and now she is returning back to the capsule where she's going to gaze fondly upon Earth in the cameras of the Alcor pod. But we wouldn't just want to gaze upon Earth. No, we do actually plan on returning, because it would be rather terrible of us if we were to leave Albert Harper and Ellen Cox stranded out here on the moon. So 5 days and 5 hours after this mission first set off, the Kestrel once again takes flight, using that LMDE stage to give us a little bit of a boost in the ascent before firing up those two advanced Gemini lander engines. Now, I did forget to turn the RCS on for this stage at the beginning of this stage firing, which was a bit of a problem. Those advanced Gemini engines do not have any gimbal on them whatsoever, so yeah, you may have noticed then that the whole craft did a bit of a wonky wobble before I finally remembered to turn on those RCS thrusters and then could actually correct our attitude. But with that out of the way, the rest of the ascent into a lunar orbit went off without a hitch. So the next obviously big challenging part of the mission is actually going to be rendezvousing with that Tranquility command module. That is easier said than done, because after we have achieved our orbit with the Kestrel lander, well, we don't have a particularly large amount of fuel left in that stage. It's gonna be very tight. But our ascent with the Kestrel lander was almost perfect, and we only ended up with a relative inclination of 0.26 degrees compared to the Tranquility orbiter. A very short, quick burn was enough to fix that inclination difference, and because of the time that we launched, it only took us 2 hours to rendezvous with that Tranquility orbiter. I am fairly sure Valentina Zimmerman, who had now been on her own for 6 hours in low lunar orbit, was very relieved to see the safe return of Albert Harper and Ellen Cox. Now all that remained was for the two ships to once again dock in low lunar orbit, before the Kestrel lander would be detached and sent crashing back down to the moon's surface, whilst our brave crew made their way back home. Once again, easier said than done. Because of the RCS configuration on that Kestrel lander, it was not easy to control at all. But we finally managed to meet in orbit of the moon. So, with the music in that section there, I was getting some proper Interstellar vibes because, you know, it was kind of all creepy, spooky, there was docking going on, it was almost like the docking scene from Interstellar, but it wasn't, the craft weren't rotating ridiculously quickly, it was actually a rather easy dock. Well, not the easiest of docks, because the way the RCS were configured on that Kestrel lander did make it a bit wobbly, but yeah, if you like that music is on YouTube Studio, done by a person called Esther Abrami. It is the same person that also does the piano music in the regular introduction for the Kerbal Gets Real series, so I'm gonna have to go in and I'm gonna have to look up and see if I can find more music by this person, because I actually really enjoy it. But anyway, enough nattering on about the music on this series. We are now performing our trans-Earth injection. That's right, we have done all of our business around the moon and we are finally getting to go home. Those 3 astronauts have spent a rather long time and it's still going to take a while for us to get back. Obviously, the vast majority of a lunar trip is spent in travel, but it's not always about the destination, I guess. Well, in this case it really is, because otherwise we're just sat in space high around Earth and that's not particularly exciting. But we did exactly what we set out to do. We managed to put boots on the surface of the moon. We got them back safely up despite a little bit of worry with how much fuel I had left. We managed to rendezvous and we managed to get ourselves back on a course with Earth, and a course that will hopefully let us capture on the first run by of Earth's atmosphere. I have put the periapse at around 40 kilometers in order to try and capture on our first run by of Earth's atmosphere, because I am going to break the craft apart. We are only going to be taking the capsule down. There we go, we can see it all separate beautifully there. And because that's now been separated from the service module, obviously we no longer have fuel cells on this craft, so we are going to run out of battery power very quickly. That Apollo capsule is very power hungry, and now that we have got no way of producing any power, well yeah, we're going to run out quickly, so we have to really hope and pray that that 40-kilometer perigee is going to be enough so that we don't skip off Earth's atmosphere and go, well, back into deep space. So here we are in the last moments of Serenity I's flight. We are re-entering Earth's atmosphere 10 days and 10 hours after we first set off for our mission. Now, there is a thing that you can do with RO capsules, and you can toggle descent mode. And when you toggle descent mode, that gives a lift surface that well, they don't ensure, but it means that the G-forces that you sustain when you re-enter Earth aren't as bad as if you just put your heat shield flat to the air. I had descent mode turned on for a little bit, and then I turned it off because I was a bit worried that we were going to skip over the atmosphere, and then I went in and did some cinematic shots and forgot to return it back on when I needed it. So what ended up happening is we ended up getting Gs of around 13 Gs, I think, during this descent. All 3 of the astronauts passed out. It's not a problem, no one died and nothing too serious happened, but obviously I would rather not all of my astronauts pass out on the final little bit of their mission. But aside from that, that is the end of this mission. We managed to get back down safely. We went through Earth's atmosphere. We didn't skip off. We bumped our nose of our spacecraft a little bit when we released that forward heat shield, but the parachutes all went off and we managed to splash safely down into the South Pacific Ocean. So with that is going to be the end of this episode. And what an episode it has been. What an episode it has been. We have finally sent man to the moon. I don't know what's going to come next for the Kerbal Gets Real series, but we're going to have to one-up ourselves, and I don't know what will happen, but I'm sure we will find out in future episodes. If you have enjoyed this episode, why not give it a like? If you have really enjoyed this episode and would like to continue with the content on my channel, please do consider subscribing. I have been Carnasa, and I will see you later.